Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet by Jamie Ford. Chapter 7. Nihon Machi. Henry found a seat on a bench and read through a day-old copy of the Japanese Daily News, much of which, surprisingly, was printed in English. There was a going-out-of-business sale at the Toshido bookstore, and a new owner had taken over Nakamura Jewelry. As Henry looked around, there seemed to be a lot of businesses for sale. Others were closed in the middle of the day, all of which made sense, as many of the news articles had to do with hard times in Nihon Machi. Apparently business had been bad, even before Pearl Harbor, going all the way back to when the Japanese invaded Manchuria in 1931. Henry remembered the year only because his father mentioned the war in China so often. According to the news article, the Chonghua Benevolent Association had called for a boycott on the entire Japanese community. Henry didn't know what the Chonghua was exactly. Some sort of Chinatown committee like the Bing Kong Association, which his family belonged to, but larger and more political, encompassing not only his neighborhood, but the entire region and all the tongs, social networks that sometimes resembled gangs. His father was a member. As Henry looked at the scores of people milling about the streets, shopping and playing, their numbers belied the hard times, boycotts, and the boarded-up, flag-draped storefronts. Poking through the streets, most of the locals ignored him, though some Japanese children pointed and spoke as he walked by, only to be shushed by their parents. There were more than a few black faces speckling the crowd, but no white faces to be seen. Then Henry stopped in his tracks when he finally saw Keiko's face, or a photo of it anyway, in the window display of the Ochi photography studio. There she was, in a dark sepia print of a little girl dressed in her Sunday best, sitting in an oversized leather chair, holding an ornate Japanese umbrella, a bamboo parasol with koi painted on it. Konnichiwa, a Japanese man, fairly young by the look of it, greeted him in the doorway. Konnichiwa, Ototo-san. Confused by the Japanese greeting, Henry opened his coat and pointed to his button that read, "I am Chinese." The young photographer smiled. "Well, I don't speak Chinese. But how are you today? Looking for a photograph, a sitting, or are you just looking for someone?" Now it was Henry's turn to be surprised. The young photographer's English seemed near perfect compared with Henry's own grasp of the language. "This girl, I go to school with her." "The Okabis? They send their daughter to the Chinese school?" Henry shook his head, waving his hand. "Keiko Okabe, yes. We both go to Rainier Elementary, the white school across Yesler Way." A moment of silence vanished in the car engines that roared by. Henry looked on as the photographer regarded the photo of Keiko. "Then you both must be very special students." Since when did special become such a burden? A curse even. There was nothing special about scholarshipping at Rainier. Nothing at all. Then again, he was here looking for someone. Maybe she was special. "Do you know where she lives?" "No, I'm sorry. But I see them a lot near the Nippon Con Hall. There's a park. You might look for her there." "Domo," Henry said. It was the only Japanese word he knew, aside from what Sheldon had taught him earlier. "You're welcome. Come back, I'll take your picture," the photographer yelled. Henry was already down the street. Henry and Keiko walked through Kobe Park on their way home from school each day, and he knew the hillside park by the numerous rows of cherry trees that lined the streets. Aside from the park sat the Nippon Con Hall, more of a kabuki theater really, complete with posters for plays he'd never seen or even heard of, like O Some Hisamatsu and Yuki no Ichiya, written in kanji and English. Like Chinatown, The whole area around the park apparently woke up on Saturdays. Henry followed the crowds, then the music. In front of the Nippon Con were street performers, dressed in full traditional costumes, fighting with shimmering swords that flexed and bent as they cut the air. Behind them, musicians played what looked like strange three-string guitars, nothing at all like the yucha or gaowu, the two-string violins that he was used to hearing when the Peking Opera performed a fighting routine. With the music and the dancing, Henry forgot all about looking for Keiko, though he occasionally murmured the words Sheldon had taught him. Owai deki te ure shi de su, mainly out of nervous habit. Henry! Even through the music, he knew the voice was hers. He looked around the crowd, lost for a moment before spotting her sitting on the hillside, the high point of Kobe Park, looking down on the street performers waving. Henry walked up the park, his palms sweating. Owai deki te ure shi de su. Owai deki te ure shi de su. She put down a small notebook and looked up, smiling. Henry, what are you doing here? Owai deki te. The words rolled off his tongue like a Mack truck. He felt a wisp of perspiration on his forehead. The words. What was the rest? Uri she de su? Henry's face froze in a smile of surprise, interrupted only by her occasional wide-eyed blinking. What did you just say? Breathe, Henry. Deep breath. One more time. Owai deki te ureshi desu. The words came out perfectly. I did it! Silence. Henry, I don't speak Japanese. What? I don't speak Japanese. Keiko burst out laughing. They don't even teach it anymore at the Japanese school. They stopped last fall. My mom and dad speak it, but they wanted me to learn only English. About the only Japanese I know is wakarimasen. Henry sat down beside her, staring at the street performers. Which means? Keiko patted his arm. It means I don't understand. Understand? He lay back on the hillside, feeling the cool grass. He could feel the tiny Japanese roses everywhere, dotting the hill with patches of yellow stars. Whatever it was, Henry, you said it beautifully. What's it mean? Nothing. It means, what time is it? Henry glanced at Keiko sheepishly and saw the look of suspicion in her eye. Did you come all the way over here to ask me what time it was? Henry shrugged. A friend just taught it to me. I thought you'd be impressed. I was wrong. What kind of notebook is that? It's a sketchbook. And I am impressed. Just that you'd come all the way over here. Your father would be mad if he knew. Or does he? Henry shook his head. This was the last place his father would suspect to find him. Henry normally hung out at the waterfront on Saturdays, with other boys from the Chinese school, haunting places like Ye Old Curiosity Shop out on Coleman Dock, looking at the real mummies and genuine shrunken heads, daring one another to touch them. But since he'd begun attending Rainier, they all treated him differently. He hadn't changed, but somehow, in their eyes, he was different. He wasn't one of them anymore. Like Keiko, he was special. It's no big deal. I was just in the neighborhood. Really? And which neighbor taught you to speak Japanese? Sheldon, the sax player on South King. Henry's eyes fell to the sketchbook. Can I see your drawings? She handed him her small black sketchbook. Inside were pencil drawings of flowers and plants, and the occasional drawing of a dancer. The last one was a loose sketch of the crowd, the dancers, and a profile of Henry from the host of people below. It's me. How long did you know I was down there? You just watched me the whole time? Why didn't you say anything? Keiko pretended she didn't understand. Wakarimasen. So sorry, I don't speak English. Joking, she took her sketchbook back. See you Monday, Henry,